When my son got sick at school, I called my mom. She said, "I'm busy. Call someone who actually cares." My little boy waited in the school alone. I said, "Nothing, just took care of my child." A week later, Mom's world started collapsing. Call after call, panicking everyone. When my mother said, "Call someone who actually cares," I swear I saw red. I was holding the phone in one hand and gripping the steering wheel with the other, and for a second, I genuinely thought about turning the car around, driving straight to her house and slapping her across the face. That's how bad it was. That's how much it hit me. My son was sick. I had just gotten the call from the school nurse that Max had thrown up in the middle of lunch and was burning up with a fever. They tried to reach me first, but I was stuck in a meeting with my phone on silent. Then they called his dad, and then my mom, the only 3 people on the emergency contact list. And I guess in that order, only one of us showed up. I was already rushing to get to him, my heart pounding like crazy, worried sick. When I called my mother and asked why she didn't go, that was her answer. "I'm busy. Call someone who actually cares." She said it like she was ordering coffee, like I was bothering her. I had to pull over because my hands were shaking and I didn't want to crash the car. Not from emotion, from fury, from disbelief. I didn't even respond. I just hung up. No point. What was I going to say? That she was heartless? That she was a bad grandma? She knew it. She just didn't care. I got to the school 20 minutes later. Max was lying on a cot in the nurse's office, pale as paper, sweat on his forehead, his little hand clutching a tissue like it was something that could save him. When he saw me, he barely even smiled. He just said, "Mommy, I waited so long." I didn't cry. I didn't let him see anything but calm. I scooped him up, took him home, set him up on the couch with blankets, soup, and cartoons, and stayed by his side all night. That fever didn't break until early the next morning. I didn't sleep a second. And while I sat there beside him, I thought about everything, about how they never showed up, not when I was in labor, not at Max's first birthday, not when I broke my leg and needed help, always too busy, too tired, too annoyed by me just existing. But I still kept them in my life because Max loved them, because he called them Nana and Papa and drew them pictures and saved them seats at school events they never attended. I kept giving them chances, but that day, that phone call, that was the end of it. What they didn't know, what they had never even noticed, was that I was the reason they had a roof over their heads, the reason their lights turned on, why their phones still worked, why there was food in their fridge every month. I'd been paying most of their bills for the last 5 years, quietly, out of guilt, mostly out of hope, too. Some pathetic piece of me thought maybe they'd finally wake up and care. That Thursday snapped the last thread. I didn't call them back. I didn't fight or explain. I just went into my online banking, one by one, and started removing accounts. Gas, water, electric, internet, phone, all gone. By the next week, I started getting calls. At first, just voicemails. Mom asking why her phone was cut off. Dad wondering why the electric company was leaving notices. Then the tone changed from confused to angry to something else entirely. Panic. But I didn't pick up because for once, they were finally going to feel what it was like to be left waiting. By the end of that week, they were calling me nonstop. First Mom, then Dad, then Mom again from a different number. I didn't answer a single one. Not because I was being petty. I just didn't care anymore. Something in me had shut off. The same way they'd been cold and indifferent for years. I finally reached that place too. Except I had reasons. They just had excuses. Max was getting better. Still pale, still not eating much, but no more fever. Every night, I made him soup, rubbed Vicks on his chest, sat with him while he drifted off to sleep. And while he rested, I listened to voicemail after voicemail. At first, they blamed the companies. Maybe there was a system error. Maybe the bank had messed something up. Then came the suspicion. Mom said, "I don't know what's going on, but if you did something with our bills, that's low, Linda. Even for you, even for me." That was hilarious. By day 10, they had no electricity, no water, no working phone lines. The food in their fridge had gone bad. They had to drive to the library to send emails. They reached out to one of my cousins in Texas. She messaged me on Facebook asking if I'd heard from them. I just said, "They're fine," and left it at that. I knew they'd run out of savings quick. They never had much, and what they did have, they spent on scratch tickets, cigarettes, and junk off TV. I'd been covering most of the essentials for years. They had no idea how fragile their little house of cards really was. A few more days passed, and then it happened. They tried to steal my car. I came out of the grocery store and saw my dad standing next to my car, fiddling with the handle. Took me a second to realize who he even was. He looked wrecked, like he hadn't slept or showered in days. When he saw me, he didn't even pretend to be surprised. He said they needed the car, just for a while. Said it wasn't fair that I had everything and they had nothing. I told him to back away. He didn't. So I called the police right in front of him, gave them his name, told them he was trying to break into my vehicle, and made sure he heard every word. He left before they arrived, but I filed the report anyway. Got the security footage from the store too. I knew he'd be back. And sure enough, 2 days later, someone slashed my tires. Nothing stolen, nothing touched. Just 4 deep knife marks across each one. I didn't see who did it, but I didn't need to. I bought cameras, installed them that night. They wanted to play games. Fine. I knew how to win, because I hadn't just stopped paying their bills. I had access to everything. Still had passwords to their bank, their emails, even Dad's Social Security login. I didn't steal anything, I didn't move a cent. I just watched and waited. It is the next step was going to ruin them. 3 days after the tire slashing, I got a notification. My dad had applied for a payday loan. He listed his car as collateral. The same car that hadn't run in 2 years. He must have been desperate because the amount was barely enough to cover a single utility bill, and the interest was brutal. I watched the deposit hit his account, and 2 hours later, a grocery store charge came through, then a gas station, then nothing. They blew through the money in a single day. That same week, a letter came to my house addressed to my mom. She must have forgotten she used my address for some of her junk mail. It was from the IRS, a notice. She'd failed to report something from 2 years back, some stimulus refund error or disability paperwork she fudged. Normally, I would have warned her. She would have ignored it, and I'd end up fixing it for her anyway. This time, I didn't. I let it sit on the counter unopened. Then, I shredded it. They were drowning, and I wasn't throwing a rope. Then came the job hunt. My aunt messaged me out of nowhere, said she saw my parents at a strip mall going door to door asking about cashier jobs, Mom in her oversized sunglasses pretending she wasn't panicking, Dad limping on his bad knee trying to convince people he could lift. I knew exactly what they were doing. Looking for sympathy, playing the "our daughter abandoned us" card. But no one was hiring. Not people their age, not without experience, not in this town. One night my mom left me a voicemail. She didn't even yell this time. She just said, "You made your point. Now fix it." I didn't respond. I was at home with Max, doing a puzzle, watching a movie, just being a mom. A good one. The next morning, they came by again unannounced. This time, they stood in the yard, didn't come up to the door, just stood there hoping I'd see them through the window. I did. I closed the blinds. Later that night, Max asked why Nana and Papa didn't come around anymore. I said they were taking a break. He asked if they were mad. I told him no because I couldn't bear to tell him the truth, that they never loved him the way they were supposed to, that they resented him because he was mine, that they ignored his birthday, never came to his school plays, and wouldn't even pick him up when he was sick and crying. They were trying to break in that night. I heard the noise at 2:02 a.m. One of the security cameras flashed. Dad again, alone this time, trying the back window. Quiet, careful, but not careful enough. I hit the alarm button and let the house light up like a stadium. He ran. I didn't call the police this time. I filed the report first thing in the morning, sent it directly to the detective who handled the car incident. Now it was official. Attempted vehicle theft and attempted break-in. A warrant was coming. That's when everything stopped. No more calls, no more visits, just silence, like they disappeared overnight. But I knew better. They were hiding, and they were plotting something. They always were. A week passed with nothing. No calls, no messages, no suspicious footsteps outside the house. I started to think maybe it was over, that they'd given up, finally gotten the message. Maybe they were too broke or too embarrassed to try again. I let myself breathe a little. Max was back in school by then, and life had settled into something close to normal. I was finally sleeping. I even went out for coffee alone one morning, sat outside a cafe downtown, and for the first time in months, didn't look over my shoulder. That's when the letter came. A manila envelope, no return address, just my name handwritten in shaky pen. Inside, 3 printed photos. The first was Max standing outside his school, backpack on, talking to a teacher. The second was my house, taken from across the street at night. The third, a close-up of me pushing a grocery cart, smiling at my phone. There was no note, no threat, just those three images like someone wanted me to know. We're watching. I didn't panic. I didn't scream. I walked to my front door, double locked it, pulled the security footage from the last 48 hours, and then I called my lawyer. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. They were unstable, and they had nothing left to lose. 2 days later, my bank account was frozen. I got a fraud alert, and when I called to confirm it wasn't me, the rep told me someone had tried to access the account with the wrong password repeatedly. Somehow, they triggered a lockdown. I asked for details. She paused and said something I'll never forget. They answered your security question correctly. I had only ever shared that answer with one person, my mother, 15 years ago during college. I'd never changed it. Now it was all unraveling. I rushed to reset everything. Bank, credit cards, utilities, even Max's school login. They were trying to squeeze me now. Turn the pressure back on me. If I hadn't caught it in time, they could have drained everything. But here's where it got even worse. My dad got arrested. I didn't find out from the cops. I found out from Facebook. A neighbor shared an article. Man arrested in connection to string of break-ins. Local resident files charges. It was him, mugshot and all. Same flannel shirt he always wore. Eyes wild. The article didn't mention me, but I didn't need it to. He was picked up for trying to break into another house. Not mine this time, but just down the street. I knew why he did it. He wanted to get caught. He thought I'd bail him out. I didn't. I waited to see what Mom would do now that he was gone. She didn't disappoint. She showed up at my house 2 nights later. No knock, just standing there in the rain, soaking wet, holding a plastic bag like she was carrying groceries. I didn't open the door, just turned on the porch light and watched her through the camera. She stood there for 5 minutes, not moving. Then she looked straight into the lens and mouthed the words, "You owe us." Then she walked off and I realized something. They weren't going to stop. Not until I finished what I started. After that night, I changed everything. I pulled Max out of school for a week, told him it was a family emergency, took him somewhere safe, a little Airbnb 3 towns over with high fences, no neighbors, and cameras of its own. While he watched cartoons and read books, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a burner phone, tying up every loose end I'd left hanging for years. First, I shut down their bank accounts. I still had access to one of their old emails. It was all linked. They hadn't noticed the password reset notification because I disabled two-step a long time ago, back when they asked me to make the internet stuff easier. Then I forwarded a record of every payment I'd ever made on their behalf to my lawyer. Rent, insurance, prescriptions, even groceries. I had years of receipts. I didn't want their apologies. I wanted proof in case this ever went legal, and it was starting to feel like it might. On the 3rd night, Max asked me if we were ever going home. I told him soon. But first, I needed to deal with something. Back in town, my mom had started going around with a story that I'd left her and my father homeless, that I'd stolen money from them, cut off their utilities out of spite, abandoned them when they needed me most. She cried at churches, showed up at food pantries with photos of Max in her wallet like some grieving grandmother. People started whispering. One of my neighbors messaged me asking if it was true, if my parents were really sleeping in their car. I didn't answer. Instead, I sent the footage from the attempted break-in to the police. That same night, Mom tried something new. She reported me to Child Protective Services, claimed Max was living in unsafe conditions, that I was mentally unstable, paranoid, neglecting him, said she hadn't seen him in months and was deeply concerned for his well-being. They sent someone. A surprise visit 2 days after we got back from the Airbnb. The woman was polite. She looked around, saw the fridge full of food, the spotless kitchen, Max's drawings on the fridge. Max came out halfway through with a toy in his hand, asked if she wanted to see his Lego boat. She smiled and said she was sorry for the confusion. I wasn't, because now I had it all on file. She had crossed the line. A few days later, a detective called, said my dad had cut a deal. He was trying to avoid more jail time by giving up his partner in the break-ins, but the story didn't add up. They found out he was protecting someone. I didn't say anything. I just gave them the footage of Mom on my porch mouthing, "You owe us." Let them put it together. After that, everything went quiet for a while, until one evening about 6 weeks later, I was sitting with Max watching TV when the doorbell rang. I checked the camera, expecting a package or a neighbor. It was my aunt, not one of the ones who took my parents aside, the one who always stayed out of it, She was standing there with her hands in her jacket pockets, looking like she had just finished crying. I opened the door. She didn't even ask to come in. She just said, "They want to talk to you." I asked why. She said, "Because they finally believe you're not the same girl they used to push around." And then she added something else. "Your son's the only reason they're still trying at all." That was the one thing I hadn't expected, and I wasn't sure how to feel about it. I didn't answer my aunt right away. I just stood there in the doorway while Max sat inside building towers out of plastic bricks and humming to himself like nothing had ever happened. And maybe for him, nothing really had. I'd protected him from most of it. But for me, the damage was layered, years deep. My parents weren't just a problem. They were a blueprint of everything I didn't want to become. Later that night, when Max was brushing his teeth, he asked if Nana and Papa were ever coming back. I told him I didn't know. He looked at me for a second, then said quietly, "You don't have to be mad forever." It caught me off guard. I didn't realize he'd been thinking about it that much. Maybe he'd noticed more than I wanted him to. Maybe kids always do. The next morning, I agreed to meet them, but on my terms. Neutral place, public, no surprises. I chose an empty church basement where they used to host community events. My aunt arranged it. I didn't dress up, I didn't wear makeup, I didn't bring Max. This wasn't a reunion, it was a final assessment. They were already sitting there when I walked in, both of them thinner, tired, smaller than I remembered. My dad's hands were shaking. My mom looked like she'd aged 10 years. They didn't start with an apology. They started with excuses, how hard things had been, how they didn't know what they were saying that day on the phone, how they were under stress, worried about money, confused, how they felt I turned Max against them. I let them talk. When they were done, I said one thing. Max waited 3 hours at school for someone to care. That shut them up. I stood up to leave. I didn't owe them a scene or a breakdown. But as I turned to go, my mom said something that froze me in place. "We don't deserve another chance, but he does." She was talking about Max. And for once, it wasn't manipulative. It wasn't a trap. It felt real. That night, I told Max I saw them. I didn't say what happened, just that they asked about him. He asked if he could send them a picture he drew. A volcano with dinosaurs and the word family written across the bottom in big, crooked letters. I scanned it, I emailed it, and I waited. The next day they replied, no questions, no drama, just, "Thank you, we'll earn the rest." That was 3 months ago. Since then, they've stayed quiet. No pop-ups, no manipulation, just steady effort. Sending cards, dropping off snacks at the door without knocking, showing up at school events without expecting hugs or credit. Max noticed. He said they seemed better, said maybe people can change if they really want to. I don't know if I'll ever trust them fully again. But for Max, I'll give them the chance to try. Because he's the only reason they're still standing. And honestly, he's the only reason I am too.